wait a minute. What am I doing? Oh, yes. It's me, and of course it's you too. So good morning, everybody. We are live. I know that it takes a little while for people to start, excuse me, to start logging on, but here we are. So before we begin, let's first of all, of course, say good morning to Grey Eagle, who is standing as usual to my right side, and good morning, Chris. How are you
Good
today?
good morning, Rosemary. I'm up fine and early, 3 hours earlier than you are.
How are you?
Time zone, yeah.
What time is it there then?
Uh 8
8 o'clock?
o'clock. Yeah.
Oh, that's not so early. I
But
was
you've
I was
been going all morning from your early day.
I've been I was up at 7 and making lists and seeing to the insurance people and doing all those wonderful things. I had a very nice guy come to assess the damage to the house. Of course, as usual, it's much worse than we thought. I remember when the roofer went up onto the roof, and I'm thinking, oh, it's just a few shingles. No, it's much worse than we thought it was. And then, every time somebody comes, it's much worse than I thought it was, and now it's much worse than I thought it was again. Because these people, they're trained to see all sorts of things that we mere mortals do not see. Anyway, I had no idea that the damage to certain parts of the house were quite as bad as they were. But anyway, keeping my fingers crossed that at some point it will all be over and done with. And as I said, I think I said on Thursday, my situation is so minor compared to so many people out there who are so struggling and so having difficulties, and it's you know my heart goes out to all of you who are struggling, whether it's with the hurricane damage or whether it's with something else. Life is such a struggle, isn't it? Such a struggle. So, all right, Chris, is there anybody there?
Yeah, we've got quite a few people logged on and they're all giving their good mornings and happy to see you.
Good. Well, I'm going to tell a story. To be honest with you, I couldn't think of a story. And with everything else going on, I'm thinking I forgot that I was supposed to have a story, because every every time I settle down to do something, the phone rings or something goes on, if somebody comes knocking at the door for this or that or what have you. So I've been very remiss. But while I was thinking about it all of 2 minutes ago, while I was thinking about it, I thought, I don't know why this popped into my head. Maybe it's because, um, there was this, as I said, this lovely guy was telling me a story about a woman. He went to her house. Her entire house had been flooded, and she'd had flood insurance for 20 years and never once had flooding. And because she was trying to cut costs, as we all are doing, aren't we? Because she was trying to cut costs with the house, she had let go the insurance policy just a week or two before. So she now has no insurance. And it occurred to me, that insurance company had had her money for 20 years. 20 years without fail, she'd been paying in. You would think, justice prevailing, that the insurance company would say, we will honour the policy. But of course, they aren't doing. And it's just, life seems to be so unfair, doesn't it? And I started to think about myself and this strange thing that I have. I have a very odd attitude. I'm sure it's an odd attitude because it's been an attitude since I can remember, since I was a kid. There are two things in life, I think, that I really, really find it difficult to deal with. One is injustice. And in some ways, I feel that the people who had the insurance policy really are being unjust to this lady. But there we are. I'm sure they probably have a different take on it. But I hate to see injustice of any kind. And and I also really, really dislike, let's say, I'm not quite sure how to put it, but bullying of any kind, or just well, because it all comes under the term of injustice, doesn't it? But anyway, and for some odd reason, my mind then, all in 2 minutes before, because I said to Chris, I don't have a story, and in 2 minutes, I had a story. My mind shot back to a time when I was just a kid. Anyway, do you think we're ready for the once upon a time? Shall we begin, Chris? Are you sitting comfortably, everybody? Because if you are, then I shall begin. So, um, once upon a time, as we know, all good stories must begin. This is what I tell my grandson. Once upon a time, many, many years ago, not quite 100 years ago, but it feels sometimes as if it's 100 years ago, there was a young girl, me, but that's I'm telling the story, right? So there's a young girl who's probably, I don't know, maybe 12 years old, 13 years old, something like this, living in a neighborhood which, let me say, was not necessarily a good neighborhood. There were some good people in this neighborhood, no doubt about it, but there were some awful people in this neighborhood too. And I would say that every third house, maybe, uh, it might have been every second house, who knew, but every third house at least had someone who had either done time in, in prison, uh, was known by the police, um, beating up their wives or their kids. What else? And that includes women as well as men. It was a rough neighborhood, and they would have. I mean, there were many families with 15, 16, even 18 kids, and the mothers would churn out the kids, and then the oldest child would take care of the youngest, who would take care, and so on and so forth, and that's how it went. So the only job the mother really had was to churn out the kids, and then she had so many kids that all the kids took care of the other kids. I don't know if anyone out there has. Maybe you lived in a neighborhood like this. Maybe you were a family of kids. You may be one of the children of this kind of thing. And if so, I would love to hear from you. So get typing in. Go to the chat room. Get typing in, because I'd love to hear your take on how it was, because I've spoken to many people over the years who were kids of families this large. They either had a fantastic time or they had a terrible time. Anyway, so this was the kind of neighborhood. The smells in the neighborhood were really not great. And Okay, so let me get to the story. So there were two sisters. Um, uh, I won't mention the names. I almost mentioned the names, but I won't mention the names because I'm sure the kids. Maybe there are grandkids as well. Who knows? But anyway, there were two sisters who lived around the corner from each other. One of the sisters lived opposite me, and these sisters, the mothers of these kids, they were really really nice people. Well, certainly the one living opposite, and we used to play with their children. Now, in my house, to describe the disparities here, in my house, we did have, even though it was a rented house, it belonged to the council, but my mother was known in the neighbourhood as the Queen or the Duchess or whatever, and it was not a compliment, because nobody in the street really cared for my mother. She was very stuck up, very snobbish, didn't speak to the neighbours, wouldn't let the neighbours into her house, really. Didn't want the neighbours to see what she'd got in the house, all that sort of thing. But I grew up with Persian carpets, beautiful carpets in the house. We used to have a decorator in twice a year to come and decorate in my mother's great style. She had a great style. She had great ideas and so on. But we had the best furniture. Our television was not one that was stuck up on a table. Our television was one that was in a cabinet, a walnut cabinet with doors that opened, and we were very fancy in our house. Now we were the only house, I think, to have fitted carpet throughout all the rooms, except, of course, the kids' bedrooms, which were linoleum. And uh, across the street, Pauline and her brother Freddie, and you notice I'm not mentioning surnames, but Pauline and they had various kids. And occasionally we'd go over there and go into their houses because her mother, Pauline's mother, unlike my mother, would have you. She'd have you in, and she'd have all the kids in, and she was lovely. Um, they had bare boards or tatty linoleum in various parts of the house. When you walked into the kitchen, it reeked. And I didn't understand what the smell was when I was a kid, but I think it must have been sort of cabbage or something like that, nasty. Anyway, um, and they were not particularly clean, but boy, oh boy, were they happy. Those kids were happy. They worshipped their mother. She was a true mother to them, unlike my mother was to me. So, there they were living in, I don't mean to insult them when I say squalor, but comparative to my house, they were living in squalor. They were happy. They had a gentle, kind, loving mother. And in our house, we were none of us happy. My parents were not happy with each other. None of us were happy. And uh, you know, we lived in luxury, lace curtains, bouquet curtains at the windows, all that sort of thing. None of us were happy in our house. See, riches don't necessarily bring happiness, do they? Anyway, all right. Let me get to this story now. Freddie was the oldest son, and when they were all sort of fairly young, in their teenage years, their father, who used to work on the railways, had a really severe accident. And although he didn't die immediately, eventually he did. So, all right. So now, as I said, the mother of this brood had a sister who lived around the corner, and she had her own brood of kids as well. So as they got a little older, most of the kids in that household were lovely, but Freddie was mean. He was really mean person. All right, so now it turns out, and it was this kind of neighbourhood, so nobody was particularly shocked, and nobody really minded that much because really, got nothing to do with you. And if you interfered with what the neighbours were doing, you were likely to get a black eye anyway. But Freddie was tupping his aunt. Do you know what tupping means? It means um, uh, he was having an affair with his aunt, who then had his baby, now the kids ended up with Freddie, who was the worst father you could ever wish to meet. They had 3 or 4 kids eventually. Now, here is the story. Are you following any of this, any of you, or am I just rambling away and you're wondering what on earth I'm talking about with this story? So, all right. So now, leading from my house, you come out of the front door, there's a pathway, and then there are 4 steps that lead up to the gate, which leads out onto the street. One day had come out of the house, I was walking along the path towards the steps, I was going out, and I could hear this kid screaming and screaming and crying and crying. And I could hear this man's voice screaming and yelling at the kid, and so on and so forth. By the time I got up the 4 steps to the gate, uh, I saw wonderful Freddie, mean, nasty Freddie, beating the bejesus out of this little 4-year-old boy. I mean, fists, not just, a slap or two, but fists. And the kid was trying to get out of the way and crouching and holding his hands over his head. And Freddie was relentless, and there were a couple of kicks in there, and so on and so forth. And Freddie was screaming at this little boy, and this little boy could do nothing but cry and scream because he was being beaten, no doubt about it. And as I say, I was about 13 years old, and I got to the top of the steps with my hands on the gate, and I could not believe what I was seeing, but instant instant reaction using a voice that I don't think I'd ever used before, but it sounded like a sergeant major's voice. It sounded like my father's voice more than it ever sounded like mine. I bellowed, and I think that's the right word. I bellowed across the street to Freddie, leave him alone. If you lay one more finger on him, I'm calling the police. Now, Freddie had been in trouble with the police a lot. The last thing he wanted was the police involved. So, of course, you can imagine he looked up from his beating of his little boy to tell me what to do with my comments. And somehow or another, at 13 years old, the injustice that I felt at what was going on was so fierce inside of me, and I was so angry about it that despite him verbally attacking me, I said to him again, one more finger on that boy, I'm calling the police. In fact, I'm going to call the police right now. And he grabbed the boy, yelled obscenities at me, grabbed the boy, and hauled him into the house. Now, here's the deal, right? So, this 13-year-old girl standing up against this man who was definitely a bully and mean and had been in prison a few times and certainly could have done harm to me easily. But I didn't even think of that. It was the injustice that boiled up inside of me, the absolute injustice. And I needed to speak, I had to speak out. Now, here's the thing, and from that moment, even to this day, as I'm telling you this story, I'm wondering, did I do the right thing? There's a part of me which likes to think that even though this 4-year-old boy is only little, will he remember that someone somewhere at some point in his life stood up for him? The answer is probably no, because he's only 4, but even so, I desperately wanted, and for years and years and years, and even now still would like for him to remember, if it's possible, that someone, and a stranger certainly to him, someone stood up for him. Somebody said no to the cruelty and to the meanness. And if it's another thing I can't stand, aside from injustice, it's meanness. The cruelty and meanness is unbelievable. I think that I find that these two things, cruelty, meanness, and injustice, I think I find them so hard to take is because I suffered with that injustice from my parents, my family, and also from the meanness and the cruelty of my mother. So I don't know if that's where this feeling of, if I see it, I've got to say it. I've got to stand up and say, please don't do that. And it's sort of something that rises up inside of me, I've got to interfere, which is maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. Who knows, right? Will that child remember that someone stood up for him? I'd like to think yes, but I'm pretty sure no. But the thing that I found the hardest, excuse me, I got it. Sorry about that. The thing that I find the most difficult is the question: did I make it worse? Did he take that child into the house, and because he was angry at me, and because he was so annoyed with me and threatened by me, did I make it worse by interfering? And there's a fine line, isn't there, when you see injustice or when you see something happening you don't want to happen. Should you interfere? Should you say something? Or should you keep quiet, go away and report it to someone? I don't know. I mean, I never called the police. I didn't call the police. And I don't even think I told my parents. Um, and just standing up to him, I remember standing there at the gate, shaking inside, trembling inside, but I could not stand by and watch a little boy being beaten up without saying something. Did I make it worse? I don't know. Did the child remember at some point somebody stood up for him? There have been many occasions since then, and as an adult, and even now, if I see injustice, whatever is going on, I will say something. I try, and since I've been an adult, I've realized that you can't just go in there like I did this time. Hey, I try to go up to someone and try to do it in a good way. I know you're having a bad day. I'm sure you're having a bad day, but please, don't do this or whatever. I try to approach it in a good way. Sometimes people respond, burst into tears, and they say they're sorry, or sometimes they tell me where to go, and I just stand my ground. Um, there's a part of me which thinks that if we stand up when we see injustice and we stand up to it, uh, it has it has to be the right thing, right? But yet, there's another story, a very gruesome story, I have to tell you, where there were some uh, young lads had come out of the pub. They were obviously a bit drunk, and they were beating up on some kid who was defenseless. They were like 6-1 or something. And a friend of mine uh, came out of the pub and saw what was going on and said, "Hey, leave him alone." Which, wouldn't you do that? So they pinned him down, and then they got razor blades and they sliced the tendons of both of his hands, slit them right down, both of his hands, beat him up, got him back to him, and he was in hospital for months and months because he dared to stand up. What is your opinion? Do you stand up? Do you say no to injustice? Or do you just watch? The Second World War was caused in large part to people seeing things that were wrong and not standing up. But what would have happened to them if they did stand up in the beginning? I don't know. It's a question, isn't it? What do we do about injustice? Do we stand up? Are we going to be counted? Would that guy have been better off, instead of interfering and saying hey to the kids who were beating up on this other kid, hey, would he have been better going to the phone box if there were no cell phones in those days, or getting on his cell phone and calling, nine. It's so funny. It's 999 in England. It's 911 in the States. But anyway, either number. Would they have been better doing that? Would I have been better going back into the house and telling my dad, you know, uh, Ron is beating up on his 4-year-old boy? Would my dad have done anything about it? I don't know. I don't think I could have done that because I didn't trust that my dad would do something about it. But also, it was that instant appalling, you've got to do something, you've got to stop, you've got to say something. Anyway, the story is about justice, injustice. What would you have done? Would you have stood up there and said something, or would you just probably done the more sensible thing and called the police or something like that? It's hard to say. Justice and honesty are important, but justice rarely is done. Very rarely is justice done. And I think it's important for us, and I think that we should all understand that it's not enough that justice is done. It has to be seen to be done. Um, what do you think? Have I caused you a conundrum? Do you think I'm a little bit of a nutcase to stand up to a guy who's in prison? Of course I am. I was 13 years old. What did I know? I'd still do the same thing now, today, all these years later. Yes. But I'm not advising that people should go and tackle a situation. But if you do see something that isn't right, that isn't just, maybe picking up the cell phone, calling the police, or getting in touch with organisations that deal with these things, maybe that's the way to go. Are you that person who, and again, I'm sort of reminded of another story, we're going back to the Bible stories, which have to do with, people walking by the blind man and ignoring him, people walking past the beggars on the street and ignoring them. Can you ignore them? Is that what you should do? Um, Jesus would never do that. Remember that? The Good Samaritan? No, that's not the right story, but you know what I'm saying. We've got examples of how good men and good women stand up to injustice. We've got many examples, not just in the Bible, but throughout history. There are so many tales of people who do good things, the right things. There are ways to start to interfere, of course, and we should find out what those ways are and what our options are if we see injustice. But are you a person who walks by, or are you a person who stands up? My grandson last winter, we were talking about this, he reminded me actually about this a couple of days ago. Last year, every time my grandson and his mother went to Whole Foods, there was a lady, a homeless lady sitting on the street. She wasn't begging, she wasn't looking for anything particularly, but she was sitting on the street, cold and freezing. And he told me all about it. Moses, she was very cold. Do you think we should do something? And I said, yes, I think perhaps maybe we could buy her a sandwich. Maybe we could get her a book to read. So we started thinking of ways to help. I love it when 8-year-olds, he was 8 years old at that time, I love it when 8-year-olds and 7-year-olds and 6-year-olds and even 2 and 3-year-olds, they can see when something isn't right. They can see. Our children can teach us so much because they know that something is right and they know when something is not right. And it's our responsibility as adults to try to help them to find ways to put things right if we can. That's my story anyway. That's it. I'm rambling now, going on and on now. So I just want your take on, are you a person who walks fast? Are you a person who dives in, as unfortunately I am? But I don't dive in. I dive in, but I dive in carefully and with thought and care for how I do it. Or are you a person who probably takes the more sensible route, picks up the phone and calls 911 and gets something done? What kind of person are you? And I'd love also to hear from you. As I've just said to you, injustice and meanness are the two things that get me. Something surges up inside of me when I see those things happening, and it probably has a lot to do with the fact that I, as a kid, suffered through those things. What is it that gets to you? What are the things that you can't stand? And what, if anything, when you see them occurring, do you do about it? We'd love, love, love to hear from you. So, all right, remember this is story time. So, officially now, the end. All right, so that's my story for today. Um, probably not what you wanted, but I also have to say, on the subject of stories, we are having a Halloween night on Monday, the 31st. Yes, Halloween. On Monday, which is the 31st of October. And I'm inviting people to come and send me either through email or whatever your stories. And for everyone who sends in a story, we are sending out some CDs, 5 CDs, healing CDs, meditation CDs. There's one small little glitch. You do have to pay your own postage of packing, but if you want a set of CDs, and they are wonderful, um, they are, well, meditations, healing, and there's a wonderful tale of Bob the Builder. We don't call him Bob the Builder, but it's Bob who was, in fact, a builder, who is a patient of mine. And he talks to us about when you have cancer, the different things that you can do to help your family to help them once you've gone, to help them to continue uh, surviving without you. And my daughter views this CD. She hates listening to me. I have to tell you, she hates. She says, "You don't sound like you, Mum." I don't know quite why, but anyway, this particular CD, I took Bob with me to a studio, and we taped. We sat down, and I just asked him questions, and he answered me and gave me stories himself, and it's just and. Unfortunately, my daughter was in the car with me, and I had to review this thing before it went out. And I said to her, "I'm sorry, but you're going to have to listen to me." And so she put up with it, and and afterwards, without me even asking her, she said, "Mum, that sounded like the best NPR interview I've ever heard. It was fabulous." So if you want one of those CDs, they're worth having. That's worth having too. So anyway, you have to pay postage of packing, I'm afraid, but there we are. So email Chris, Kris, at rosemaryaltea.com, or Rosemary at rosemaryaltea.com. Put in the subject line, I don't know, competition. Yeah, put that in, because or stories. Put in whatever you like, so we can get to it. You've got until the 30th of November to send them in, but get cracking, everybody.
Of
All right.
October, Rosemary? 30th
Sorry.
of October?
Yeah, I think because that then gives us, if we can get the stories in, we can sift through them. Because I'd like to either read a couple of your stories on our spooky Halloween night, or what? Or maybe you'd like to come on and tell us your story yourself. So we're inviting you if you'd like to come on. We can do a double screen, I think, and you can tell your story. Or you don't even have to go on stream. You can, whichever you want to do. But anyway, get cracking. Now is the day. You've got all weekend to figure out something. And if you had a spooky thing happen to you, well, we want to hear about it. All right. So, Chris, how are we doing? Any questions? Any comments? Got some itchy nose.
There were a number of comments throughout the time you were
Okay.
telling the story, Rosemary.
Okay. Let's go.
Mary Mary started you off saying thank you for standing up to Freddie. And then Judith says your compassion and dislike of injustice is the same trait as in my family. You remind me of my sister and her action against bullying and injustice. You were
Yes.
courageous and admirable. Applause.
Well, I don't know about courageous and admirable. Maybe rash would be the thing. I don't know, but thank you anyway. And I love your sister already.
Joyce says, "You did the right thing. That child will always remember that you were there for him."
Thank you for that. I could argue that, couldn't I? Who informed? Well, but you know what? Maybe it was such a big event. I do remember certain things when I was a 4-year-old. So let's keep our fingers crossed that he knew that somebody cared. Can we do that? Yeah, that sounds good to me. Okay, keep going.
Cheryl says, "I was picked on in high school and made fun of often. No one back then ever stood up for me. The way I stood up for myself was to become really good at something. In school, it was music and band."
Well, I was picked on as well when I was a kid by my family, obviously, but I was a strange child. Was a very strange looking child. I was small and very skinny, and because I was very unsure of myself, my head would always be sort of cocked at a weird angle, almost as if I was ready to duck, for the next insult, whether whether physical blow or emotional blow. Um, so I was, sort of. Obviously, I was a perfect target. However, I will tell you that I remember when I was about 15, our teachers decided they'd have a beauty contest. It was an all-girls school, and they picked three girls out of the group, to the 3 or 4 girls out of the group, to sort of parade around, and then all the kids had to vote to see which kid was, the prettiest. And for some weird reason, the teachers picked me, and I came second. So when I'm saying I was a weird looking kid, I couldn't be that weird, really, could I? But anyway, I always felt that I never fit my skin. I'm sure some of you know how that feels, Chris.
Mary says the poor little 4-year-old boy was already getting abused and probably continued to be
Oh,
abused.
totally sorry.
Most of most of us are going to regret ourselves more if we don't stand up. The regret of turning a blind eye.
Yeah, yeah. It's just not in me to do it. That's because probably I like to interfere too much. Okay, keep going, Chris.
Judith says nowadays it's best to call the police. Most bullies carry guns and would probably shoot anyone who interferes,
Yeah,
sadly.
yeah. My advice to people is don't get involved, stand back, but get your phone out and call the police and tell them something's going on. Yes, obviously. Yes.
Annalise says, "I am sure that I would have done the same. I can't stand injustice against a defenseless person or an animal. The
Well,
courage comes from somewhere in me."
well, good. See, I'm liking you all more and more, getting to know you all more and more.
Let's see. Mary says, "Rosemary, you were strong then and now. Be proud of yourself. And thank you for standing up for the boy."
Well, um, yes. But it's a funny thing, isn't it? You take an action, and then you find yourself warring with yourself. Did I do the right thing? Did I make it worse? Did I make it better? What? And the only thing that I kept thinking was, even though he was probably, beaten even worse when he got inside the house, was keeping my fingers crossed that hopefully somewhere in his memory he will remember somebody stood up for him. And that's a huge thing because, as a lot of you know, those of you who have been bullied or you've been made fun of, or you've just perhaps simply just been ignored, the worst thing is when no one stands up for you. No one says no. No one says don't do that. And that makes you feel less because you feel that nobody cares about what's happening to you. So an interesting subject. Keep going, Chris.
Well, it makes me think of this 4-year-old has probably only known beatings. And by you standing up, for once in his life, his head could come up and go, wait, somebody else doesn't think this is right? And then maybe that gave him courage.
Okay, let's see what everybody else says.
Lorraine says, I probably would have screamed loudly to stop the beating of an innocent little boy. The incident outside the bar, I would have called the cops.
Yes. Well, yes. But I'm not sure that that was in the days of cell phones. I'm not sure.
Rhonda says, I always trust that inner voice to know what to do when witnessing injustice. When I listen to that inner voice and act on it, I know in my spirit that I've done the right thing, just as when I push that inner voice away, I know that I should have listened.
That's a good example of what we should do, right? Um, and when you hear that inner voice, I mean, for me, it's easy, of course. Since I've grown and I've had Grey Eagle, who, if I were to step forward, he would put his hand on my shoulder if he didn't want me to. But if I'd step forward, he would have my back and he would be there for me absolutely. But um, unfortunately, well, we do all have something like that, but we're not all able to listen, are we? We're not all able to see that. Keep going.
Lorraine says, I absolutely hate injustice, meanness, bullying, violence. Who doesn't hate it? My astrology sign is Libra, the scales, so maybe I feel it more.
So you're very balanced. Do you know what your soul sign is? I'd be very curious to know. Have you any idea of what your soul sign is? Because I'm a Taurus, which is very much an earth sign. So in astrology, I'm a Taurian. In soul with soul signs, I'm a warrior, and you can see, the bull and the warrior. You can see that they go together, and so that makes me even a stronger and a more positive warrior than I perhaps would have been if I had been influenced by other energies. Oh gosh, isn't it fascinating, these situations? We could go talking like this forever. Keep going, Chris.
Maggie says, good morning. Glad to see you back. We always said we can pick on each other, but if someone else picked on us, you
Oh,
had all 5 of us. So I dive in carefully.
yeah. Yeah, so Maggie, I've heard that said so many times. I can say what I like about her because she's my sister or brother, whatever, but dare let anybody else say anything. That's fabulous, isn't it? Because that's loyalty. You've got loyalty towards your family, which is fantastic. That's huge.
Tracy's saying that they would stand up, definitely.
Good.
Rhonda's remarking that she has your awesome CDs already.
Well, that doesn't mean that you can't join in because you could give them to someone for a Christmas gift. Christmas is coming up. Christmas is coming. And if you wanted 2 packs of CDs, at the moment, throughout Halloween and throughout to the end of October, and maybe we might even extend it, you can have all of them for the price of postage and packing.
All right. Irene says, I don't know how to act, but I would certainly act in some way.
Well, good. You sound like an earth sign. If you're a person who takes action, that is definitely looking at an earth sign here. But if you're wanting to take an action, or you take an action but you're dithering, well, that might mean you're a water sign. Who knows? Soul signs are fascinating. That's what you should work on finding out for yourself. Learn more about who you are. Learn more about why you are. Learn more about why you. Some people you connect with instantly, and some people not. Learn why your father loves your sister more than you, or you have a better relationship with your mother than your brother does, or whatever. All in soul signs, everybody. Really important to know. It's so important for me to know and to understand that I am definitely uh, a warrior soul. Keep going.
Lorraine answered your question about what soul sign she is. She says she's water.
Oh, nice. So that's very compromiser then, which is a very good thing. And earth signs and water signs are the most compatible. Did you know that? Yes, because water feeds earth and earth gives water a place to be. Yes, keep going.
Ron- Rhonda says, I was also picked on all through school. My family moved to Colorado from Ohio. I guess I had an accent even though I never noticed it. That was a reason to pick on me. Besides the fact I had large eyes and I was super skinny, my sister, who is 2 years younger than me, not only stood up for me, but beat up a person that picked on me.
Wow. Well. We all of us need a defender at some point in our lives. And when we don't get one, it's so awful for us because, so often we just don't know how to defend ourselves. Sometimes it's easier to defend other people than it is to defend ourselves. I've always found that. And certainly when I was a kid growing up, it was so much easier for me to stand up and defend other people than ever it was to stand up and defend me.
Cheryl says my initial feelings are to run over and help, but I usually call someone instead to assist whoever or whatever needs it.
Good. That's sensible. And you're taking an action, which is great. That's really good. Yes, that is good.
Julia says, Dear Rosemary, you did the right thing. You are so brave. I am 50 years old, but yesterday someone close to me threatened me emotionally and physically, and I just stepped away and did nothing.
Oh, well, um, if you have someone who's doing these things to you, sometimes, sometimes the way to win is to walk away, to turn your back, and to walk away from that person and to have nothing more to do with them. And when you say you walked away, I think that's a very brave thing to do too. But I'm hoping that whoever this is, I'm hoping that that's the last they saw of you because no one deserves bullying. No one deserves to be threatened for no reason. And you've obviously got a bully there right in your midst, and you should be not just walking away for that moment, walk away forever. You don't need people like this in your life. Sometimes it is so much easier to remove yourself because bullies love to have someone to intimidate, right? They love to have that person there. But if you remove yourself, who are they going to shout at now? Try the wall because that's all you've got because you don't have me anymore. That's what you should be thinking. Um, I'd love to hear you comment on what I'm saying to you. And, if you would like to email us with your situation, see if I can help you with that as well. But never, don't ever tolerate. Don't ever tolerate. You're 50 years old. You have a fabulous future ahead of you if you turn away from the bullies and get them out of your life. Sometimes the way to be brave is to walk away permanently. That's not cowardice, that's bravery. Because sometimes the hardest thing you can possibly do is to walk away from a situation that it's hard for you to do. Chris.
Julia had continued and said, I prayed and got my peace again. I had fear at the moment, of course, and I thought I did not want the situation to get worse. Please know you did the right thing against Freddie. You saw the small child. You stood up for the boy. I think you are brave. Lots of love from Julia from the Netherlands.
Well, Julia from the Netherlands, please, just know that we're with you. And walking away is not the coward's thing to do. Walking away is often the sensible thing to do, and often the hardest thing to do. It's really hard when you love someone, you care about them, and you just want just want uh, something good to happen. To walk away and leave behind that situation can be the bravest thing you can do. So I'm right with you.
Vicky agrees. Vicky says, bravo, walk.
Yes,
And Judith says, sometimes the wisest action is to walk away.
yeah, yeah. Save yourself. Walk away from the negative. I can remember about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago or something. I remember it's I sort of what got into me I don't know, but I had so many people in my life who were, let's say, I'm going to put it politely, they were so negative, and some bullying, some pushing, some thinking that their ideas were better than mine for me, and I really struggled for a long time, and then I just decided I'm getting rid of any negativity that is in my life. I'm just going to get rid of it. It was the hardest thing for me to do because I lost people who were valuable to me in so many other ways. But you can't allow the negativity to destroy you. You just can't. You've got to. Well, you can, because and lots of people do. But all that happens then is you become downtrodden and you become unhappy, and you find you lose yourself. You forget who you are because there are so many other, perhaps stronger, more opinionated people who are trying to control you, trying to, you know, tell you how you should live your life and so on. And sometimes you just have to say, no, enough. This is no matter what the consequences of walking away are, they're going to be better. Those consequences will be better eventually than walking away from these or staying with these people and putting up with the, let's say, the bullying or the intimidation or the, whatever it is that's going on. Chris.
Leslie says 36 Alpine, Arizona wild horses have been shot and killed, and some have been wounded, and some are missing. Can Gray Eagle shed some light? Is it
Well,
the Forest Service? They want the horses gone.
I think I'm not sure that you can do very much about it because it seems to me that nobody in your area is that concerned to stop it. So Grail is suggesting that we all just one of these times to stay still. I think it's not just one person doing this. I think it's a group of people doing this, and their intention is to clean the forest. To Their intention is to clean the area, um, or what they perceive as to clean the area. I wish that I could say to you, this is the group, and here you are. But I think you and the people in that area already know who these people are. It is a group of people, and I think they're being paid to do this. So I think that this is an organized attempt to destroy um, these beautiful wild animals. And unless you all band together and you know go to your sheriff's department or whatever it is and make your demands known that this has to stop, I don't think you can do any vigilante stuff. You can't go out there and stop it yourself. There's nothing you can do, and I do believe also that it's a bigger organisation than you think it is. Graver says to stay still. Allow the winds of heaven to dance between you and the fate of these horses. Let God let God put his hand upon the situation. You will see it will not stop for a while, but it will stop, and those responsible will be caught. So I hope that's helpful to you.
Irene says, "Thank you for the advice. I recently bought your book, Soul Signs, and look forward to discovering more about that."
Just remember the golden rule. There is a golden rule to this book. It's very plain. I very plainly write it in. And so many people they don't want to abide by the golden rule. You first have to, before you decide, there are 12 choices. There are actually 13, but let's say for most of us, there are 12 choices of soul sign. People get it mixed up with astrology in a way, but although all things are connected, it's very different than astrology, but in so many ways. But there are four main soul groups: earth, water, fire, and air. There are four of those. Now, the book, at the beginning of the book and going through the first part of the book, focuses on the four groups. You have to decide on which group you are before you decide on which sign you are. That's the golden rule. Once you have found your soul group, only four of them to choose from, you'll know which it is. When you read them through, you'll say, oh, that's me. Okay. Then within each group, there are three soul signs. One of those soul signs you will eliminate completely. The other two, they sound very similar. Just by a process of elimination, you can make a list, if you like, of the character traits. Which are you most? Which character traits do you have more of within those two soul signs? And that's how you'll come to find out which soul sign you are. Now, once you've done that and you know what soul sign you are, have a blast. Read all about it. Read all of the soul signs. Read all of the soul groups, because then you'll be thinking, now I wonder what my sister is. I wonder what my mother is. I wonder what my brother is. Oh, I wonder what my friend Annie is. I wonder, and you'll be going crazy sorting out all of your friends, your family. It's a fun, 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 fun thing to do. But before you do yourself, soul group first, golden key. Soul group first, soul sign second. And please let us know if you enjoy the book, because it is phenomenal. Even though I wrote it myself. I mean, I actually wrote it with Grey Eagle. Grey Eagle guided me through this book. This is a totally guided effort. Boy, oh boy, did I learn a lot when I was writing that book. So please let us know. Email us or come on the show, whatever it is. Let us know how you do, my darling. But enjoy, enjoy, enjoy. Soul group first, soul sign second. Okay, Chris.
You're right at time, Rosemary.
All right, well, I think that then we should end it. So let me remind you all again, we are having a Halloween show, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 9 o'clock New York time, for want of something better to say. Unfortunately, I know, I'm sorry, it's late, but it is Halloween after all. It's going to be 2 o'clock in the UK. Just stay up or go to sleep early and set your alarm, and then you can wake up and have an hour with me doing the spooky story stuff, and we're going to have a lot of fun doing that, and I'm looking forward to hearing all of your stories. If you email or if you email, send us in your stories or tell us you would like to tell a story, give us some indication of what it's about. You can come on the show if you'd like. We'd love to have you on the show. Or you can tell your story without appearing on the show. or you can just tell me the story and I will relay it if it's good enough, if I think it's good enough. And every single person who applies or writes me a story will be eligible to have a 5 set CD. And just if you've already got one, remember, they make great gifts. It's normally, how much would it cost you normally? $75 for all of them. We're giving them away to you. The only thing you have to do is pay postage and package. I promise you it's worth it. You can give them all out. You know, if you send me 2 stories, you're eligible for 2 packs. We don't care. We're just giving them away. Why not? As long as you pay for postage and packing, there they are for you. And so we look forward to hearing all of that stuff. We need your stories in by the 30th, preferably earlier. Don't leave it to the last minute. By the 30th of October, we need your stories in. In the meantime, thank you all for joining me today. And I feel as if we've had a really good discussion here about justice and all that stuff, which is good. That makes me feel good. So please enjoy the rest of the day. Again, thank you very much for joining me, Chris. Thank you once again for your great facilitating. Last but by absolutely no means least, thank you to David for being here for us and for helping to guide this show as he does. Until I see you all again, we will be back next Saturday with another story. We'll be back on Thursday for the Spirit World Sees All. We're trying to get a cracking up show going. We may even be doing 1 or 2 off the cuffs. We'll see. But because everything's going on with me, I'm asking you to be really, really patient. We've only got another 2 weeks, I think, not even, for not even actually, to get to November when we'll start again, getting on with getting on. And so until then, until I see you again, everybody, please, please, please have a very, very blessed rest of the day and have a very blessed weekend, everybody. Bye bye.